So what you get on the right is a whole bunch of people calling for open war, calling for the imprisonment or the murder of US citizens. What you get on the left is every prominent figure that is in media, that is in politics, saying this is wrong and we unequivocally condemn it. And you get 4 follower Twitter accounts that say some unhinged shit, and we treat those two things like they are the same, and it is very fucking clear that they are not, and they should not be. Hey everybody, welcome back. As promised, I'm going to do something a little bit more serious today, and today we're actually going to talk about the First Amendment. Now, before we start, I just want to say, we both understand what the First Amendment is, and I feel like there are a lot of people, mainly on the right, but a lot of people generally, who think the First Amendment just means you can say anything and there should never be consequences. To be clear, that is, in fact, not what the First Amendment says. The First Amendment says that the government cannot give you consequences for your speech. So when we talk about the First Amendment, that's specifically what we're talking about. Ryan, anything you want to add?
No, not at all. I think that's pretty apt. I think it's important to recognize that speech in general has consequences.
So I think it's important to start with what is probably the biggest piece of news around the First Amendment, which is the brief suspension of Jimmy Kimmel. Now, we are recording this on a Tuesday, and tonight he will be coming back. Now, the two media affiliates that initially prompted the preemption of his show, Sinclair and Nexstar, have both said that they will not resume his programming. They will continue to preempt it. For anyone who does not know, the way media works is a little bit confusing in the US, and it's broken down into large national, so there's sort of your cable groups, and then there is your more open source groups, so local TV channels fall into this, and a lot of those are sort of held up and propped up by other corporations. Now, I think when you talk about Kimmel, it's somewhat important to think about what he said that was so egregious in the wake of the killing of Charlie Kirk. And it was so egregious in the fact that he didn't say anything egregious. Right, Ryan?
That's actually absolutely correct. I think it seems clear that regardless of what he said, it was used by the government or opponents, say on the right, to remove a figure with a actually large rating, who has a microphone to speak out against the president, and that was the main motivation.
Yeah, and we know that this was sort of kicked off by the comments of the chairman of the FCC, Brendan Carr, as he was talking to paid Russian stooge Benny Johnson on his podcast. I don't know about you, Ryan, but I do despise the fact that most of our government on any given day can be found on a podcast. I find that that's pretty fucked up because I feel like they have jobs that they should be doing.
Well, their job is destroying America, so you actually have a lot of downtime, surprisingly.
Honestly, if they weren't all incompetent, we'd be fucked. Thank God they picked the worst people.
Many would say that was very true about the Nazi government as well.
I feel like they at least had, matching uniforms. Although, I will say, if you look at basically any of the women in the right-wing Trump sphere, they all seem like they have uniforms. It's just the plastic surgery is the uniform for them.
Can't disagree.
Now, what Brendan Carr said was, he said, well, we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way. He was saying that to ABC, which houses Kimmel's show. And it was pretty clear from what he was saying that he would use the power of the FCC against ABC if they did not comply. That was the plain implication of what he was saying. Now, he's walked it back since then. But, I mean, they always do. They say the thing they mean, get caught, and then walk it back. Now, I think it's pretty important to say that, like, there's a very, very big difference between a bunch of people calling or writing into ABC to say, hey, we want Jimmy Kimmel off the air, and the chairman of the FCC showing up on a podcast saying, hey, we can do this the easy way or the hard way.
And I think it's important, you brought it up a second ago, and about what did Kimmel actually say to warrant this response. And I'll read verbatim the quote that Kimmel said. He starts with saying, thank you for joining us from Los Angeles, the second largest city in our bitterly divided nation, where, like the rest of the country, we are trying to wrap our heads around the senseless murder of the popular podcaster and conservative activist Charlie Kirk yesterday, whose death has amplified our anger and our differences. He goes on to mention he's seen extraordinarily vile responses to this from both sides of the political spectrum. I mean, whataboutism, but
I want to cut in there.
Whatever. Oh, sorry.
Well, I want to cut in there because I want to say, the both sidesism here is wild, because what you get is you get one side of the political spectrum, the side on the right, who has figures who've influenced the president directly in hiring decisions. You've got Laura Loomer saying it's time for the Trump administration to shut down, defund, and prosecute every single leftist organization. If Charlie Kirk dies from his injuries, his life cannot be in vain. We must shut these lunatic leftists down once and for all. The left is a national security threat. Elon Musk, formerly the richest man in the world, now the second richest man in the world, saying if they won't leave us in peace, then our choice is fight or die. You've got libs of TikTok, famously known for being an absolute fucking shitheel and showing up the White House to get the Epstein Files Volume 1. Pretty embarrassing if you ask me, saying this is war in all caps. So what you get on the right is a whole bunch of people calling for open war, calling for the imprisonment or the murder of US citizens. You got people saying, I don't want the National Guard sent to Chicago, sent to Democrat cities anymore. I want the Air Force sent, implying we should just bomb cities in the US. So that's what you get on the right. What you get on the left is every prominent figure that is in media, that is in politics, saying this is wrong and we unequivocally condemn it. And you get 4 follower Twitter accounts that say some unhinged shit, and we treat those two things like they are the same, and it is very fucking clear that they are not, and they should not be. And that's not even counting Trump's response to it. And again, what we know for a fact is that before we knew anything about the shooter, they were saying the left did this, the left killed him, this was some sort of organized plot to do it. And we know that even now when they talk about it, they still say they killed Charlie. Who's they? One person?
No, agreed. That's something, we're both very terminally online. That's something I've seen as well. A lot of their rhetoric seems to be around using words like they, us, we, like there's as if there is some kind of designed effort by the Democratic side to foster this violence and division. Now, let's be clear. I've seen a lot of takes. We're not getting into specifically the Charlie Kirk stuff, but I've seen a lot of people's opinions about it, and honestly, some of them can be vile. That being said, they do have a right to make those statements, but they're not necessarily endorsing violence. Should also be noted, they say, he again the whataboutism. How about when Paul Pelosi, husband of Nancy Pelosi, was attacked? The almost every single Republican person that I can think of had something. I mean, the son of the president, Donald Trump Jr., famously retweeted a photo of his what he called the Paul Pelosi Halloween costume, showing underwear and a hammer. I mean, why are we supposed to treat what they say as with the same, these are people in positions of power, and we're supposed to somehow accept that these are equal to rando anonymous people on Twitter. These are people running the government. They are not the same thing. But Kimmel is also he's in a position where he has to be a bit more, they usually have to do a bit more of their centrist style talking points. But Kimmel continues saying some people are cheering this, which is something I won't ever understand. In fact, so you can see he clearly goes there to not only his condolences essentially, but also that he's not endorsing the violence that, honestly, Charlie Kirk himself did. But Kimmel goes on to say, well, with all these terrible things happening, you'd think our president would at least make an attempt to bring us together, but he didn't. He mentioned, granted, he does mention Obama and Biden and even Clinton did, but he actually also says President Bush even had a moment of attempting to bring us together, war crimes aside. He said, while showing screenshots of former president's social media statements, he points out President Trump did not. Instead, he blamed Democrats for their rhetoric. That's what this all comes down to. The fact is, he is openly criticizing the dear leader and his regime, and they know they have the FCC, they have the ability to strike back financially against Disney and ABC. And that's what this is about at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think, when we look to the core of his argument was that the right had spent the weekend trying desperately to paint this shooter as anything other than one of them. That narrative happened. They were calling it a trans person before they ever knew who did anything. We still don't know a lot about it because, to be entirely honest, this FBI has proved at best unreliable. As Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. Kash Patel famously wrote a series of children's books about Donald Trump. Dan Bongino, famously a podcaster, former NYPD officer.
That is the state of the American government, being run by podcasters.
And so, yeah, we still don't have a bunch on motive, and some people have questioned the validity of the text messages that were released. All that to say that this is a pattern with right-wing violence that occurs, or with political violence that occurs at all, where that violence will occur, and then the right will immediately paint it as the left. And we saw this, a prime example of this, back in Minnesota, back in June, I believe, with Melissa Hortman, her husband, and the other lawmakers that were attacked. We saw a man who had a list of Democratic elected officials he was targeting, a man who intended to hit up the No Kings rally that day, a man who is an avowed MAGA Republican, who is an avowed evangelical, who they painted to be a leftist, despite the fact that he was a registered Republican whose roommate said he was absolutely MAGA, and they spun conspiracy theories even with that, you had fucking Senator Mike Lee from Utah making jokes about it. So when they say they clutch pearls about the death of, that they feel concern or they have humanity around the death of someone, that's a fucking lie. And we can point to example after example after example of this. We can point to every school shooting. We can point to every mass shooting. We can point to all of these things where when it happens, all they say is thoughts and prayers, and then they fuck off. Or worse, they fuel it and say, no, that was the left doing that. That was the left killing Democratic politicians. And it's bullshit. So when they clutch their fucking pearls, they're full of shit. And that is entirely evident based on everything if you look at them. But much like, I think something really, really obvious if you paid attention to politics for a while, is that the modern Republican Party has this problem of projecting their own flaws out onto everyone but themselves. If they say a thing, it is because that is the thing they are doing or the thing they feel. And it is again and again and again, you can see this, they call people snowflakes, but if you say anything they disagree with about Charlie Kirk, immediately they're going to try to get you canceled. Now, I actually saw, and Ryan, I don't know if you saw this, but I saw someone who, I believe it was Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports, I know very little about, but I do believe he tweeted out that canceling people over Charlie Kirk statements was not cancel culture, because cancel culture is going back in time and digging up old tweets to get people canceled, whereas this was just consequences.
Yeah, I actually think I did see that from him, which, I know you don't know much about him. I know a decent amount. He generally has some pretty dog shit takes, but watch any of his videos and you'll be like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so we get this environment where they are trying to use the death of Charlie Kirk as a way to tamp down on the political speech of others, where they try to make people afraid, where they try to drive a narrative. And so, yeah, this is not just random Twitter people, although they have a bunch of those. But this is, again, mainstream elected Republicans, people who hold positions of power in the government, people who hold positions of influence outside of the government. This is their entire ecosystem pushing to tamp down on speech they disagree with. All of that backed by the power of the US government, which is why it's an attack on the First Amendment, which is why it's an attack on free speech, because it is not just that someone is calling your employer and saying, hey, we don't like this person, we don't want them to work there. This is the government calling your employer and saying, hey, we don't like this person. We control the entire regulatory environment in which you operate. And if you don't do something about it, we're going to do something about you.
Absolutely. I think and I do hold conflicting beliefs to a certain degree on speech. I am a big believer in the paradox of tolerance. I don't think that maybe not, I don't believe the government has any right to censure the speech of Nazis. I think that we as a society have the right, and actually, nay, not the right, we have the responsibility to push back, fight, and I guess censure, in a sense, the violent rhetoric that the other side is spewing. The thing is, they equate what they say to they equate their fascistic, violent rhetoric to anything that the left says, and they're just not the same thing. So I think that's a big thing for me. But also, like you stated, the issue with this is that it is people in positions in government that are trying to limit the speech of private citizens and what they can say. Well, and specifically about any criticism over Donald Trump and his administration. Now, bright note, no one has to hand it to Ted Cruz, But there are quite a few on the right who did manage to speak out against the words of Brendan Carr, Donald Trump. Granted, they will never say Donald Trump, admittedly, because they can't speak out against their figurehead. But I mean, Tulsi Gabbard made comments pro First Amendment during her little bit at Charlie Kirk's funeral thing, and of course, you know, Rand Paul. Rand Paul went out there to criticize Carr's statements. Granted, Rand Paul is a bit. He does have his moments where he's a bit more against the line of the Republicans. He is, you know, I mean, his name is Rand Paul, so of course, you know, he's Randian. But also, even Ted Cruz went out there and said how, you know, made comments about Carr's whole we can do this the easy way or the hard way is straight out of, you know, Goodfellas, or that's like a mafioso going into a bar, you know. So it's nice to know that there are still some on the other side who will, but what good is that if they're not willing to stand up against the literal figurehead who represents the essence of Carr's statements? Donald Trump himself, you know, he went up there and said, he posted, what was it, the day after, he said, "Great news for America, the ratings challenged, Jimmy Kimmel show is canceled, congratulations to ABC, blah blah blah." But then he points out that he's like, that leaves Jim. He mentions Jimmy Fallon and
Seth Meyers.
Seth Meyers, both being on NBC. He's like, their ratings are also terrible. Do it NBC. You know, clearly he's also calling for others to be removed from air that criticize him. And of course, we also famously had this with Stephen Colbert getting canceled. Let's not, you know, they say it was a financial reason. We all know that's bullshit. Yes, old media is dying. Cable is dying very slowly, but it is. But we all know that's not really the reason. Stephen Colbert, out of the four of them, is the most openly spoken, openly speaks about the insanity of the Trump administration, and he has done so since 2016. So the point is, the fact that our government is, I mean, these are the slippery slopes that lead to fascist governments. You know, they pretend like, you know, the right is okay with them silencing, you know, the rights of citizens, and by the way, rights also extend to non-citizens, throwing that out there. They want to censure the rights of they want to take the rights of those who disagree with them, as if they are not next on the poll.
Yeah.
It's just insane that this is the situation that we're in.
Two things. One really quick aside. I've known about Rand Paul for far too long, I think. Never connected the Ayn Rand mix with his name. Never really got that. So that's interesting. I will say there's this principle that the Republicans, but more broadly the right and the alt-right play by, which is that there should be a set of laws that protect but do not bind them, but that same set of laws should bind but not protect their opponents. It is very much in the classical vein of they will wield the law as a weapon against people, but they can never be wielded against them, or they call witch hunt. And we saw this with Donald Trump tweeting or truthing or whatever the fuck he does in his spare time at Pam Bondi to charge people that they haven't charged enough people yet. Just out and out charge his political opponents, not for a crime, just for anything really, not that he's not been trying. So there's that weaponization of the DOJ, which they decried so heavily during the Biden administration, which prosecuted and investigated more Democratic lawmakers than it did Republican lawmakers because the FBI was operating independently. I can assure you that Merrick Garland as the head of the DOJ or Christopher Wray as head of the FBI had not written a children's book about Joe Biden. Then let's take it even outside of the government arena. If you look at what Kimmel said, and then you look at what Brian Kilmeade said on Fox and Friends about how, well, if these homeless people don't want to take medications, then they ought to just be euthanized, just lethal injection them, and then be done with it. He said that. He said to kill millions of Americans because they're an inconvenience. He didn't lose a single minute of airtime. And yet somehow we're supposed to, when Jimmy Kimmel says, hey, this is messed up, but it's also messed up what the other side is doing. It's the worst thing that could happen. It's a travesty. It's a monster for saying it. But when Kilmeade is saying kill all the homeless, fucking crickets. So there's this double standard that's existed for far too long. They benefit off of in every circumstance. When you look at things like media interviews of Democratic politicians versus Republican politicians, you find that they kid glove the Republican politicians every time, and they drill into the Democratic politicians. The Meet the Press interview with Kamala and Tim Walz was harder than any interview Donald Trump's had, except for that one, I forget whether it was British or Australian reporter who all the memes,
the greatest interview,
all the memes
ever
came from. That wonderful meme of the guy looking at the sheet and then Trump holding up the sheet. It's the only one he's ever had any fucking challenge on, and yet we're supposed to act like these things are the same. They're not. But
nope.
Again, they want to use the power of the government, and they want to use the power of fear to limit people's speech. Which is why I think right now it is extremely important that you do not let that fear limit your speech, that you do not buckle under and bow, because what regimes that seek to take power want is the easiest path to power. They want you to capitulate in advance. And as I've said in previous videos, a lot of our pillars of society, a lot of the corporations, a lot of the law firms, a lot of the universities capitulate immediately without putting up a fight. And all that does is encourage the regime to do more and to push that boundary further. And we've seen them do this time and again. Nothing is enough for them. They will always ask for more. If you give a moose a muffin, he's going to want some other shit too. And because of that, we see these attacks ramp up again and again and again. And that has an effect on all of us, all of just the individuals out there who see what's going on and see that it's wrong. And we feel very different from the first Trump term, where we feel like there was really a groundswell of the culture that was behind opposing him. And now it feels like all of those pillars are afraid. And that makes us afraid, because who are we but individuals in a larger societal context? We don't have the reach or the power of other people, so we have to be more afraid of what we say. But we shouldn't be afraid of what we say at all. If you're not calling for violence, what you are saying is your right to say. Now, obviously, use your discretion about what you say, because some things can be objectionable to an employer, and then they might not want you to remain employed if it causes a shitstorm. But you should not have to risk being in jail. You should not have to risk being in court for saying an opinion, as long as that opinion is not pushing for violence.
Well, I hold the view that I don't even think employers should necessarily punish people, as long as what you're saying doesn't invoke violence, racism, other forms of discrimination. If you're just pointing out self-evident truths, you'd think, I don't think people should be punished for that. But that's the problem. But that's the problem, right? The right have gotten punished because they know they hold these disgusting views. So they want like you said, they are projecting. They want anything. They want others to be held to the same standard that they are. They want others to be held at their point, as if what they're saying isn't objectively more disgusting.
I mean, to be clear, the reason the companies can do that is because, as the Supreme Court decided, corporations are people, and thus they are also entitled to their opinions on how. Also, because we don't really have worker protections in this country. But
these are separate issues. But you're right.
But I will say, what we like, if you're ever sitting there thinking about, oh, how can I say that? Like, I'm afraid of saying that. I want you to remember that just today, the White House posted a TikTok using the Pokemon theme song and clips from immigration raids talking about catching them all in regards to immigrants in this country. And again, not just illegal immigrants, legal immigrants too. People with in-process visas or green cards, people who are, for whatever reason, not white enough to be part of America, or not sufficiently right-wing enough to be part of America. And so if you think what you say is objectionable, take 5 seconds to look at anything this unhinged, deranged, batshit insane White House has put out on social media at any point since January 20th. It has been one offensive bullshit thing after another. Fucking AI Ghibli art, fucking alligator Alcatraz, fucking every single day they're doing another deplorable thing. And to be fair, it is their right as individuals to say that. Is it okay for the government to do it? I feel like that's a line that's kind of weird. I feel like it's a weird spot to be in. And I just think that at the end of the day, it's important to remember that the only reason they want you and me and everyone else to shut up is because they know that is what gives them more power. Your silence is compliance to them, and they will treat it as such. So when there are injustices, when they are doing things wrong, it is your responsibility to speak out against them, to be loud, to make it clear that this is not normal and this is not okay, and it shouldn't be. Not in America. Now, I know a lot of people don't care about all that high-minded, good moral stuff. It's about their day-to-day life. Well, guess what? Your day-to-day life is going to fucking suck. Have you watched anything made by conservatives in the entertainment sphere? Have you watched anything? Fucking watch any of Ben Shapiro's shitty fucking movies, and you know what you'll do? You'll be like, oh shit, we need to not let Hollywood be this at all. All of their right-wing bullshit makes the most terrible movies, because I feel like, and this might just be me, but I feel like a lot of people who ended up in the right-wing sphere just ended up because they couldn't actually legitimately make it into the thing they wanted to do.
It's because they had no talent. And
so then they're like, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take over the culture, and then we'll have to be having it. But if you let them...
to say that... I'm sorry, go ahead.
But if you let them get control of the culture, not only is it going to be bad for America and democracy, it's going to be bad for your cinematic experience. So at least on that fucking line, if you thought a TV show that's been out has been good, thank a fucking lib, because that's who's making most of them. Thank a progressive. These people are the ones making the entertainment, and they make stuff that is good. Like, again, look at anything done by the right wing, and you've got like what? God is not dead. God is not dead 2. God is not dead 3. God is not dead 4. Like the entire Left Behind set of movies, the existence of Kirk Cameron. Like, you want this to be the whole culture?
I just want to leave the audience with a couple things. It's clear, it's very clear, like, I think this is a big thing that the left needs to work on, and not everybody in the left agrees with this, and that's perfectly fine too. I think there's a certain amount of the culture and of America and patriotism that needs to be reclaimed by our side. There's nothing wrong with loving your country. There's nothing wrong with, while also acknowledging the things your country has done. And but also part of being, I think, patriotic is demanding better of our country, of our government. It's important. I think I want to leave with the words of our founders, who were not perfect men by no means, far beyond that even. But the words they wrote on paper matter, and they get, in the words of, you know, James, I believe it was James Baldwin, who said, think of America, think of America, what America that can be, maybe not what it is. I messed that quote up, but our founders, when writing the First Amendment, said Congress shall make no law representing an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the right free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble or to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Think about the current government. Think about the current regime in power in our country, and how they have gone out of their way to break every single one of those things. We have a right to stand up and speak. And I think it's important to also point out what the Declaration of Independence says. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute of these ends. We are not doing anything wrong for demanding better of our government, so don't let them hijack our rights and our say in our lives.
Well said. I think at the same time, it's important to remember that patriotism isn't a hollow thing. It isn't just, I throw a flag on my swim trunks, I throw 4 flags on my truck, and I love America. No.
Exactly.
Loving something means loving all of the thing. Its flaws, its imperfections, what it does well, and understanding that it can do better. America is only the thing it is because it strove to be better continuously. It didn't look at a specific time and go, this is what we will be forever. It was designed to be something that evolved and changed with the world, and we as a society have not done enough of that changing. We have been too stuck in our ways. We have not had enough amendments to the Constitution to reflect the reality that changes around us. But we were designed to be able to do that. Being patriotic is simply the act of trying to make the country better than it is, because it can always be better.
And just like our founders intended, it was even in their own time, this was a country built upon diversity, both maybe not in terms of.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't thinking that one. They were thinking diversity in terms of thought,
of ideology, but that doesn't mean that we can't extend that beyond. When we say, like, our backgrounds create who we are. This country was built on the minds, the body, the heart of immigrants. What makes this country so special is our history of intermingling of thoughts from both sides of the spectrum. I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody on the right that every thought they've ever had is wrong. I don't believe that. I'm sure they plenty of their thoughts have some merit. But the point is to have the freedom from our government having the freedom that allows us to speak those thoughts to each other without our government restricting it.
Yeah. Well said. And just to close out on my end, the Declaration and the Constitution were promises. They were things that were made. All men are created equal. It's a promise they made that they couldn't keep, but that we should strive to keep. The Civil Rights Act, women's suffrage, all of these things were put in place to live up to that ideal and to live up to that promise. And what we see right now from right-wing reactionaries is them trying to chuck all of that out in favor of some 1950s Leave It to Beaver universe that never even existed in the first place. And all because they're so afraid of something different than themselves and something different than what they understand that they don't take the time to understand that the differences are what make life interesting. It's what makes life worth having. So I think that's it for us. As always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will be back next week with something new. See you guys later.